open the floor again for question and answer. Over there, the gentleman on the right side.
My name is Nabil Fahmy, as you know. Mr. Fahmy, I was very interested in your comment concerning that we should enhance our relationship with the U.S. And some year ago, around in February of 2013, John Kerry came to Egypt and he wanted to meet a few parliamentarians. I was one of the few privileged that he has chosen. I wonder why he chose me, but that is a different story. He met with 6 of us. He was trying in 2013 to set the principle that democracy is the ballot box. And he and the press in the US were pushing us to go into elections and to regain our seats into the elections. The 6 parliamentarians that were in that meeting, we all came from different schools from a political spectrum. We all refused them. And he kept on pushing and he wanted to push us to the greatest extent to go there. I came out from that meeting with John Kerry with 3 things. One, I understood why the government, the US budget is in deficit because of the flying circus that travels with the secretary, with all the advisors. There was a circus. It was not really a meeting of a foreign minister. The second thing that I took from this meeting is that there is a great divide between US fundamental principles and what they think is the best interest. Huge divide between these two philosophies. And the third point that is very important to us today is that a weak Egypt internally will not be able to help its foreign policy. We need to rebuild Egypt internally. We need a strong Egypt, a developed Egypt from both economic point of view and a cultural point of view in order to have a real presence on the foreign scene. Without a strong Egypt, we will have a problem with the foreign
Thank you. By the way, someone sent me a written question. Since we're already given the chance for anyone who would like to ask by themselves, I would rather leave it for whoever would like to ask this question to address it by himself. Mr. Gentleman here, I'm sorry, just 1 second, please. Yes. Tfaddal. The front row here.
I'd just like to ask a question that concerns Egypt. Not something that we can blame on external forces or plots or preparations for invasion or even the strife within Egypt between the various factions, which we see every Friday after prayers. You get such a global vision of an all-round view of a possible future and presence. Is there any future that you see in addressing the problem of the speed with which our population is growing if the leaders do not bite the bullet very uncomfortably and very unpopularly and address every Egyptian who said a few moments ago that one of the questions that you change and I change, we have to change ourselves. We can no longer pass the buck. Is there any future with this increase in population for any form of economic advancement?
Thank you. And the gentleman, he wanted to send a question here, if I may give him.
My name is Shaheer. I'm a banker. In our business and the way you conduct the business, we think about strategy and putting a plan. What is the plan that Egypt has in mind and the options left facing the problem with Ethiopia that is coming tomorrow? We don't have so much to waste. And the level of announcement made by the government in this concern, in my viewpoint, not enough.
Thank you. I'll go this side. If I can take one more question from here and then we'll go back. This side, please. Sorry, I can see well, but whoever is raising his or her hand can get the microphone.
My name is Nadia Younes. I'm in charge of the cultural center, social and cultural center in Cairo. I hope my question doesn't sound antagonistic, but it's dealing with Egypt and how the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is presenting Egypt abroad, and whether the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has influence on other authorities in Egypt to implement the image that we're trying to present before. But my question is, What can the Ministry of Foreign Affairs do to persuade the international community that Egypt respects human rights, is not making mass arrests or targeting the young revolutionary idealists, and that we are not reverting to the Nasser era of Zuwar al-Fajr, which means, of course, the security coming at night to arrest people, which is undermining your efforts to portray Egypt as an emerging democracy, which is supported by the military, but not ruled by the military.
Thank
I
you.
have a second question. I don't know.
Can you just say the brief, the first 5-6 words of the second question? I don't want it to sound like I am not welcoming.
I understand. I want to know what you can do to help reunite the Syrian refugee families here in Egypt, because now the husbands and brothers and sons are not given visas in order to come and visit their
Thank you.
families.
Thank
Many of them are working abroad,
Sure.
and they would like
Thank
to
you.
have the right to come and visit their
Okay.
women, their children, and so on and so forth.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Minister.
Thank you. Let me start with Mr. Makram Abid's question. We can be a highly professional Ministry of Foreign Affairs and take the best advantage of whatever resources we have in terms of seizing opportunities or defending our interests. But at the end of the day, we all live in a transparent global society. Therefore, you're 100% correct. If we don't have a stable, productive, robust domestic situation, ultimately we will hit a cap where we can't get any better. And I'm not only talking about our ability to provide material assets, whether it's in Africa or otherwise, but it's also, frankly, in what kind of risks we can take, how much influence we have. For that reason, or in spite of that, I don't have the luxury of waiting until everything calms down or waiting until the economy starts up. I've been tasked with dealing with the foreign policy during a period of transition. Therefore, what I've been trying to do, well, let me it's been a bit long, but let me lay this out rather quickly. On my third day in office 6 months ago, I laid out 3 objectives for the upcoming year, which was the maximum period of time this government could operate. 1, let's defend the revolution. Secondly, the revolution in the larger sense. Secondly, I want to refocus the center of gravity of Egypt's foreign policy into that of one that is a nation state, not an ideology, and that emanates from Africa and the Arab world. In that context, we need to deal with the urgent issues, and I openly said I am going to look for multiple choices and multiple options. And to be very honest with you, and this will come into the next question as well, I said the same thing when I was ambassador of Egypt to Washington back in 2005. Even then I was saying, to be a better Egypt, even to be a better friend of America, I need to be more dependent on myself and have more choices. So, yes, and the third dimension was, how do we prepare the Egyptian Foreign Ministry for the future? And part of that was, we need planning. I need visions. What are the different scenarios of the Middle East, Africa, and then up for 2030, we put together a task force. Give me the different scenarios. On that basis, we will then define what our goals are, and only on those 2 bases will we define what our policies will be. Not the other way around. Now, of course, we could be wrong. But if I'm 20% wrong, 30% wrong, it's better than not planning. And if I know what the potential scenarios are, then I can develop my own skill sets. We established, for example, in the Foreign Ministry, a desk dealing only with technology. I know Lisa did that here, but I didn't take it from Lisa. it is out of my respect for the importance of how technology conveys power and influences power and authority. So I need to build myself to go to where I need to go to achieve Egypt's aspirations. As we try to do that, I will do the best of what I have in trying to fix things and put it in the right place, and then at the end of the interim period, hopefully hand it over to somebody who has a longer time frame to implement this. But Sama here, completely correct. We need to build ourselves internally. Now, dealing with the world, including the US. Look, anybody who tells you it doesn't want a relationship with the United States should retire from foreign policy. They're going to be the predominant country for many years to come. But having good relations does not mean for me agreeing. I mean, my American friends know more frequently than anyone else. I frequently disagree with them. And I used to do that in Washington. And frankly, they accepted it. I will need a well-managed relationship with the United States. It does not mean that I will agree with the United States. And the more they understand that, the more they will not expect me to agree to things that are inconsistent with my own interests. But to think we can ignore them is just frankly amateurish. But we will be expanding into other areas quite seriously. Population growth, well, if you have a robust economy and you're able to create the demand for resources, populations can help you. In the short term, population will be a draining force on Egypt, at least for the next 10 years. A serious draining force. Ultimately, if we can decrease the growth rate and increase our resource paradigm, it can be transformed into a positive. But presently, it's a very dangerous weight that's going to bring us down very heavily. Egypt's plan on the Ethiopian issue, particularly water and Ethiopian issue. Again, I'm probably more candid than I should be. The idea of building dams on the Nile, including in Ethiopia, are not new. These are things that have been there for over 2 decades. Now, this particular dam creates a problem for us because of its size, the way we see it being developed, and the rate, the pace in which it's being developed. But we frankly actually offered to place our own equity in the dam. We've offered to pay for part of it. In other words, we will help you build the dam, provided it is built according to the right structure and the right size, and we agree on how the dam is managed and the water is managed. Again, that proposal wasn't agreed, it wasn't accepted, it's okay. We still agreed to help build the dam by providing international financing for that. Again, with one caveat, that we have an agreement on how the waters will be managed, not only during the building period, but after that. My conclusion on this issue is, well, let me be very straightforward. We are not at a good point on this issue presently, neither for us, nor for Ethiopia, or Sudan, or anybody else on the Nile. And this has the potential of being a very serious issue and creating very difficult choices to make. But if any one of us wants to look at their future, the only way we can fulfill part of our aspirations is to cooperate with each other. This cannot be a zero-sum game. They cannot create the development resources that they need if there's a crisis situation about the dam and about the Nile. It simply will not happen. And frankly, we cannot get more water than what we have now, except in cooperation with the other Nile Basin countries. And the same applies to Sudan and the other countries. So it's a period of tension, and we're being very candid. I'm going around the world raising this issue every single meeting I have. Not by way of asking people to attack one side or the other, but by way of making the point how important this is, and we will address it very seriously. But our objective is to bring people to the negotiating table to build a future together. Presenting Egypt abroad, human rights issues and arrests. Look, we had 2 revolutions in 2.5 years. Why? One, huge youth bulge. Youth want change. Secondly, more and more increased exchange of information. People see information, see the choices, they think about what they want to do, and if you don't give them the opportunity to make the choices, then you're creating a sense of distance and friction. And bad governance. Anybody who tells you that if you didn't have bad governance, you'd have 2 revolutions, nobody's talking to you. Because the first 2 elements can be actually positive catalysts, rather than negative catalysts. But we had bad governance. So there will be a process of re-establishing our institutions to deal with the standards not demanded by abroad, but demanded by Egyptians. I mean, you should never think that we're doing this for the West. We're doing this for Egyptians. And we need to respect human rights for Egyptians, not for any foreigner. Now, having said that, in all honesty, and I'm not using this as a caveat to say that there aren't things that are wrong, or that we shouldn't correct ourselves. In all honesty, there's a lot of misrepresentation also of what's happening. And there's a lot of simplifying of the transformation process and the tasks and the challenges that come with them. But my commitment, not as a foreign minister, I will add that, but as an Egyptian, my commitment as an Egyptian before being foreign minister, is I will continue to work on better governance for this country. It is the only way forward. Now, I don't have a domestic portfolio per se, but we do have a responsibility. I started off earlier by saying we need to engage with the world because that's where our national interest is. And it also means we're going to be part of the world. Believe me, the world is listening to us. Let me quickly go on a tangent and I'll come back to this quickly. One of my greatest problems when I was in Washington for 9 years, probably in the middle of that, was that people thought we were so consistent they got bored. They assumed they knew what we were going to do. And in most cases, we would do that. So they weren't listening. And Gad, a colleague of mine, knows very well. When we used to say the Arab Street, people would laugh. Who in the Arab Street? There's no Arab Street. Say that now. They say it. I don't have to say it. I just look at them in the eye. And they know there's a domestic paradigm here. I have to manage the Arab Street. I have to respond to the Arab Street. But people are listening. The world is finding the Middle East and North Africa very difficult to understand. Because, frankly, we're changing so quickly. But they have to accept that this is going to take time. And we have to accept that we have a responsibility to make the best effort all the time. So that's really where I am on these issues.
Thank you. Just follow up on the Ethiopia issue. You said hard choices that we might have. Would that, as if I use the American cliche, all options are on the table, including the military one?
Look, I will answer the question, but there was a question about Syria. We have limited resources in terms of providing assistance to refugees, but yes, we have an obligation to Syrians to provide them as much as we can. Those who we allow to come in, those who come in on legal visas are treated like Egyptians. They use the same medical services and everything else. But you are right in saying we can't allow all of them to come in. We have 300,000 Syrian refugees here, and I'm not talking about Syrian families who were here before the crisis. So it's a tragedy. We're doing our best, but it's not easy. How does I stop answering political questions 40 years ago? And I won't start that now.
Okay. I made my disclosure anyway before. I would like, we were supposed, actually now we're over about 10 minutes or 7 minutes of the question and answer, but since the first procedures were a little bit faster, so I think we have the luxury of getting 5 more years or 6 minutes, not years. With what's going on now in Egypt, you can count the minutes by years. So I will try to get as many questions as possible, as this is the last round, and please help me by making it very brief, and then we go to Foreign Minister for concluding remarks. So please go ahead.
My name is Karim Rifat. Until very recently, I was honored to be a member of the Egyptian Diplomatic Corps. I opted to choose a different career. Didn't have the chance to serve under your command, but I think I'm the biggest loser. I wanted to touch, having been part of this honorable house, about the question of what the diplomats, my fellow friends and ex-colleagues, are trying to. They're trying to face immense challenges currently, at very difficult moments, being a diplomat, but also talking about investments, about trade, about the image of the country, motivating those people.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but just in order to give a chance for others.
Between this role and the very limited resources that is today dedicated to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Egypt.
Thank you. تفضل يا حضرتك. Right here. Okay, I will be back. Here there are 2 questions, and if you please make it just very brief question, so we have only like 5 minutes for all the answers.
Very briefly, in some instances, the domestic situation is quite chaotic, full of problems and lack of clear vision. And there is a major consensus that foreign policy is oftentimes the first battle line for domestic policies. So in such instances, how do Your Excellency believe the case should be? Should we go all the way defending policies that might not really be aligned with the foreign policy in the right manner, or should we revisit these policies which might entail contradiction of the domestic policies?
Okay. Last question here for the gentleman in this side. I will go then after that, and I'm sorry for not being able to accommodate all of you. تفضل حضرتك.
صحفي مصري جريدة النهار الكويتية. أسأل معالي الوزير القمة العربية المزمع عقدها في الكويت، كيف تتوقع نتائجها؟ وهل سيكون هناك فعلا مجرد بوادر لأي تقارب بين مصر وقطر؟ وإذا سمحت الأستاذ حافظ عاوز أسألك سؤال، كيف تقيم؟ هل من حق أسألك؟
لا انا ممكن هجاوب عليه بعد السيشن، بس اتفضل حضرتك انا بس عشان الوقت بتاع سياده الوزير.
طيب الحاجه الاخيره، كيف تقيم الدعم المعنوي والمادي لدول الخليج لمصر، وماذا اذا لم يكن هذا الدعم موجودا في هذا التوقيت الحرج، وكيف ترى الضغوط المتواصله من امريكا على مصر في هذا الوقت العصيب جدا؟ شكرا.
The question, as all of you heard, is about the upcoming Arab Summit in Kuwait and what the minister would expect out of it, and if there is any chance of rapprochement with Qatar. I will do here. We will need the mic because of the cameras and the rest of the floor.
I beg to differ with you. Upper riparian countries have the right to develop themselves, not only generating electricity, but they can raise crops. It cannot be based only on the British generals taking the Egyptian army and occupying Sudan and giving Sudan and Egypt the bulk water. So the idea of invading, etc., is nonsense to me. Thank you.
Thanks. The gentleman here in the back. Okay, we'll consider that the last question.
Ahmad Khattab, I'm an alumnus of the American University in Cairo and the University of Toronto. Your Excellency, I have a question. I'm seeking a clarification or maybe an explanation of why do you think there's been a consistent low turnout of Egyptians abroad going to the voting polls. It was not only the last referendum, but since January 25th, 2011? And what could the Foreign Ministry possibly do to overcome this and reconnect Egyptians politically?
Thank you. I will conclude here and add my own question also, just in case. Given that two people, honorable speakers, came here before you, Mr. Nabil Arabi, as also speaker in this memorial lecture, and Amro Musa, both were foreign ministers and then Secretary General of the Arab League. Would you consider that in the future? And would it be a punishment in this case? And the follow-up to it is, you were known before as recommending rotation of the position of the Arab League Secretary General. In the new position now, would you still accept the idea of rotating with other Arab nations? Thank you.
Okay, let me answer the last question first. We're now into rotations of Egyptian presidents. So that's what we're focusing on. In terms of what I would do, unless AUC doesn't want me at all, or unless you're worried about my coming back, this is where I'm coming back. Inshallah.
That's why I didn't ask for a follow-up.
The low turnout question, excellent question. Look, I'll be very candid with you. Even when I was ambassador, when Egyptians were not allowed to vote abroad, I took a position publicly that I supported Egyptians voting abroad. And I was almost reprimanded by the Egyptian government. How could you possibly say this? It is the right of Egyptians to vote abroad, and I believe that. Now, whether we can do it in a large enough scale or not is another issue. The reason for the low turnout was initially people didn't have the ID cards and weren't inscribed into the system. But second time around, because we did not allow for mailing voting through the mailing process. You had to physically come and vote yourself. And if you're looking at something like the United States, it's a huge continent. We have 5 consulates there. Australia is a huge landmass as well. So it's not that easy to create the mechanisms for them to vote. We're going to simplify the process this time around, although I doubt, I don't know yet, it's not my portfolio. I doubt that mailing your vote will be allowed. But we will simplify the inscription process. But I'm all for continuing to work on giving Egyptians the ability to vote abroad. We need to keep the participation. I mean, this is a historic part in our history. We're trying to lay the basis for a new political system, a new identity. So if we're even with traditionally low turnouts on any voting process, I'd be very disappointed if we're less than 45%, frankly. That 45% is a realistic expectation. Anything less than that, we just have to keep trying to do better. The gentleman about the upper riparian countries and the use of force. Well, since I didn't answer that question, I assume you were disagreeing with Hafiz rather than with me. But that being said, no, excuse me, it's not about the British agreement. International law does not allow for any country on a water basin to use it in any fashion that negatively affects other countries on the same water basin. So there are norms for that, and you're not allowed to build it down at all without notifying the other members before you do that and ensuring that it does not affect their interests. I support, as Egyptian Foreign Minister, Ethiopia building a dam. Let me be very clear about that. I do not question their right to build a dam. We're talking about what kind of dam, what size, how quickly, and who manages it. As I said, it's not going to be a zero-sum game that fits Egypt or Sudan or Ethiopia alone. We have to work together. Kuwait Summit. Arab world is going through a lot of different changes. As much as countries would like to focus more on developmental issues as we move forward, I think this summit will involve a lot of developmental issues, but also a lot of inter-Arab issues. There's a lot of disharmony in the Arab world. I think if we have a good, candid, straightforward discussion and create mechanisms to follow up on that, it will be a good beginning. I don't expect, frankly, major breakthroughs in a short period of time. If that's the case, then we are, frankly, delinquent in solving the problems because they were very easy to solve. On the issues of Arab assistance, look, I've publicly pronounced myself over and over again. I will ensure that Egypt has choices. And I'm going to work on the basis that Egypt's part of the world, emanating from my own region, be that in Africa or in the Arab world. So a lot of it will be Arab and Africa. But I'm not going to have one choice in the Arab world, I'm not going to have one choice in Africa, I'm not going to have one choice around the world. The assistance given Egypt was extremely well appreciated. It dealt with a very serious liquidity crisis, and it will probably lay the foundation for a growth process in the months and years to come. But we will have to build our own country. Providing aid to Egypt is not a handout. It's an investment. It's appreciated because it's a choice, but it's an investment. A quarter of the Arab world lives here. So anyone who thinks that what happens in Egypt, since we're not a betting country, will stay in Egypt, doesn't know what we're talking about. If we succeed, and what I want to achieve is Egypt as a role model, not as a country that goes around telling people what to do, but it gives them the example of what they would like to be. If we do that, it will have a very positive effect throughout the Arab world. If we fail, it will have repercussions far beyond our borders. And that's why some of the countries are helping us. But at the end of the day, we need to build the country mostly by ourselves. I see here the word battle lines, I'm not sure what that was, but limited resources. What am I doing with limited resources? AUC gave me a management degree. It didn't teach me, and then, well, the first part of it, the physics was dreaming, but the management degree, sorry, I didn't mean that. The management degree told me to look at resources and how to best use them. For a medium-sized country, you need to look ahead, plan, determine what the scenarios are, set your priorities according to what you really need and what you can achieve, and then pursue the right policies. I've established 7 or 8 different task forces to help build or create better policies, to help make the Foreign Ministry more capable in dealing with these new issues. And they're not, by the way, task forces only from within the Foreign Ministry. They involve a lot of people outside the Foreign Ministry. So until someone gives me more resources, I will do the best with what I have. I will try to help in building Egypt, but I will also try to convey as clearly as I can, as rationally as I can, our policies to others. I say this modestly, and I know it's going to sound pompous, but I don't care if people like me or not. I honestly don't. What concerns me is still understanding. I'm not here to be liked. I'm here to defend the national interests of the country. And I will do that at any cost. So people like what I want to do, they don't like it. If you like it, it's better and it's easier. But that's my least of my concerns. What would worry me is if they cannot calculate the opportunities or the risks involved in relationship with me. Because in that situation, I'm not getting the message across, and people will make big mistakes, and I will lose on good opportunities. So my long answer to your question is, make use of what you have as best as you can, and do it in the shortest period as you have. Thank you.
Great. I think since just the minister threw the ball into my court regarding to Ethiopia issue and the question, I think if Louisiana purchase that happened under British rule could be renegotiated now, or Alaska sale could be renegotiated now, I think Ethiopia could renegotiate the portion of Egypt in the water, the Nile water. Thank you very much, and really appreciate it. And the microphone goes back to the president.